It is expected to pass the Senate. I suppose it's just a question of when and whether or not any individual senator, like, say, Rand Paul, wants to hold things up over the course of the next day or two.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to pass the Senate on either Tuesday or Wednesday. You can kind of take that to the bank. It's just a question of whether Rand Paul, maybe a few other conservatives, delay it from Tuesday to Wednesday.
Okay, so from there, the president signs the bill, and then there are questions about what happens after that. It could be some weeks before this material to Ukraine specifically. We're talking about a lot of stuff. Some of it is ready. Mike, some of it still needs to be manufactured.
Yes, no, a lot of this is talking about manufacturing weapons in the United States, mostly to replace stuff that's been taken from U.S. Army stocks. But we do know that there is equipment, there is material that's already been being put in place by the Biden administration. So we would expect at least some of that to come pretty quickly.
Well, of course, this isn't just, at the end of the day, a foreign aid bill. To get it through the House, there was also a sidecar package that included a number of things, including the TikTok divest or ban bill, slightly tweaked from what the House originally passed. There's now a year-long period in which ByteDance could divest the U.S. arm of TikTok. But is that going to cause any problems in the Senate, knowing the rest of the bill looks pretty similar to something the Senate already had passed? But that wasn't in it, and not all senators were thrilled about it initially.
Yeah, now, it looks a lot like what the House had passed previously, but as you noted, some people in the Senate were pushing back on some provisions, including the Commerce Committee chair, important person on this. And as a consequence, partly to satisfy her, they extended the period that he could divest for up to 6 months more. And obviously, from TikTok's standpoint, all that lobbying in some ways, even though they didn't get what they wanted, they got a good return because they got 6 months more revenues out of this for sure. So there were those tweaks. That said, this is going to pass the Senate. They're not going to have any problem with it that would cause them to vote against the foreign aid bill.
Talk to us about Speaker Johnson. Mike, there are 3 Republicans who have signed on to a motion to vacate, threatening to fire him. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as recently as today, says she plans to make good on that threat. But Donald Trump is waiting in the wings, and we are told he doesn't want to see another speaker fight in the throes of a campaign season. Is Mike Johnson as good as protected? Is he safe as long as Donald Trump feels that way?
Well, I think he's, at least for the time being, probably safe from overthrow unless Donald Trump were to affirmatively weigh in on this. I think you're right. Donald Trump has shown he doesn't want this sideshow in the House, but also, more importantly, whether or not Democrats as a whole back Johnson, and they might very well. We know that there are some national security Democrats, including Adam Smith, who you had on your program just last week, saying if the Ukraine aid is passed, I would come in reserve and support him. So we know for sure that some national security Democrats would sort of help keep Johnson in power, and maybe even more of them. So unless there was some big thing that caused a lot of Republicans to revolt against him, then I think he's pretty safe for the time being. That doesn't mean that these people can't make life miserable for Johnson. Sure, yeah. And they say their whole strategy is to make him so miserable that he quits.
That he retires or resigns. I don't know. It seems like Mike Johnson might not be losing a lot of sleep over this week, but we'll see what happens when they all return. Mike Dorning, thank you very much. Elsewhere today, lawyers making opening statements in former President Donald Trump's hush money case in New York. The former president spoke with reporters earlier today.
I should be in Florida now. I should be in a lot of different places right now campaigning, and I'm sitting here. And this will go on for a long time. It's very unfair. The judge is conflicted, as you know. It's very unfair what's going on. And I should be allowed to campaign.
For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's Peggy Collins with us at the table. Peggy, the narrative until now has been that this is actually helping Donald Trump. He's been raising money. He's been using the courtroom as a platform to deliver the message. We're going to start hearing from witnesses. We did for a brief period of time today. Dave Pecker was on the stand, but we're going to start hearing from Stormy Daniels, from Michael Cohen. The stories are going to start to get ugly. Could this be the beginning of this narrative turning against Donald Trump?
Well, I think that's one of the things we're going to have to follow. I think a lot of the facts in the case actually have been known for a long time, but now it's playing out in front of the American public at this incredibly unprecedented and historic time where you have Trump as the front runner for the election in November, and the split screen that's there in terms of Biden being able to go out and campaign in different states. And as the former president was saying, he's in a New York courtroom. The flip side, though, to that for Trump is that he's getting a lot of free media, which is very expensive. But with the covering of the court case, that's certainly something that he gets every day he's in court, except for Wednesdays for the next several weeks at least. We had a story on the Bloomberg Wire today about how Trump spent about $4.9 million just in March alone on legal fees, and that he's left with about $6.8 million unless he starts to dip into other funds for this. So that differential in terms of money, but also free media at the same time, is really going to be something we have to watch.
Yeah, especially as he's trying to actively fight multiple legal cases at the same time he's trying to run a presidential campaign. And of course, it's him versus Biden in terms of the Republican and Democratic presumptive nominee. But there also is the potential for third parties to be disruptive here, Peggy, including if you look at NBC's poll from over the weekend. Trump holds a 2-point edge over Biden when it's head to head. You add third parties, including RFK Jr. to the mix, and Biden leads Trump by 2 points in that ballot. So does that suggest that actually the spoiler may spoil more for Trump than the incumbent president?
Well, I think either way, 2 points is really razor thin. So I think in our poll and in an NBC poll, the numbers are so close that a third party candidate could draw from both. And in either case, it could be what causes the election to flip from one to the other. I think it's important that over the last week or so that RFK got on the ballot in Michigan, one of those swing states. So that's going to be incredibly important to watch. And the other is just where the independents go, because they're so important right now. And that may make the difference, as well as turnout. So it's, do people come out? Because as the NBC poll shows and our polls have showed, many people want neither candidate in this election. And that will be something that we have to watch very closely.
We've got a big day coming up this week for Donald Trump here in Washington before the Supreme Court. The immunity argument will be heard. Arguments will be heard on Thursday. We just finished talking about this sensational criminal trial that's getting underway in New York. Are we to believe that, as they say, any press is good press?
Well, I think that one thing that is true is that he's getting national press every day that he's in court, and as the multiple court cases compound. But also, this is completely unprecedented in terms of the American public getting tuned into two main things, that really it is Biden and Trump, which I think a lot of people were not thinking it would ultimately end up being that, and then also how they feel once they get more details in these legal cases as they tune in over the next several months.